Joshua Buchalter. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us. Mackenzie just ran through a lot of the headlines for us, and I'd love to get your reaction first on that, on all the actions that the Trump administration is potentially putting on some of these chip makers, most especially Qualcomm. Can you tell us what your read is? I know that's a buy, I believe, on your coverage list.
Yeah, that's right. And thank you for having me on. I think, there's no way to spin it. Increased trade tensions between the United States and China is not good for the semiconductor index. But I think there's, two things, one of which for the broader group and one of which for Qualcomm specifically that we need to remember. One, I think many of these investigations and export restrictions are being used as negotiating tactics as part of a larger trade deal that will be announced, hopefully over the next few months. We don't obviously have a way of timing that, but I think that will be the outcomes have the potential to change a lot based on where we land at the end of the day on the U.S.-China trade. The other thing is in regards to Qualcomm, we should be realistic here. This investigation specifically was related into a tuck-in acquisition in their auto business that I'm sure is important strategically long-term, but there's likely, very minimal contribution to their revenue today. Qualcomm's auto business as a whole is about $4 billion. I would expect this business specifically to be within its smaller but growing ADAS piece. The bigger concern would be if this expands into their smartphone business and there were more restrictions on their sales to the Chinese customers there. But we really think that's unlikely. Qualcomm is heavily embedded in the Qualcomm smartphone market, and there aren't obvious and easy replacements for the breadth of their products.
Got it. Okay, so Qualcomm shares are down about 5% today. I know it takes a lot to go through when you want to go through and change your price targets, but it sounds like you largely think it's a negotiating tactic. This is probably not going to come to bear, and if it does, it's a small part of the business. This doesn't change your outlook in general for shares of Qualcomm?
Correct. Again, Qualcomm is much more tied to the mobile market. It's not been really in the crosshairs of the U.S.-China trade tensions.
I'd love to expand the conversation to AI. It seems like that's all anybody is talking about, right? For a while, you could just say AI on your conference call and your stock got a bit higher. It seems like we understand it perhaps a little bit more now. Still, valuation's still pretty high. NVIDIA close to $5 trillion. Is there still room to run in these names? And if you're an investor that isn't in, wants to get in, how careful do you have to be in stock selection? Or if you're in AI and at least you're headed the right direction, you're going to be okay?
Yeah, I think the reality is it is still early in AI. There are plenty of external factors that could disrupt things. But you mentioned valuations. If I look at where NVIDIA is trading, for instance, at sort of high 20s, low 30s multiple, for the growth rates that they're putting up and for how important they are to the global compute ecosystem, I actually don't think it's all that expensive. I think it's fairly valued and on next year's and 2 years out earnings, and those earnings numbers are going to move meaningfully higher. If we step back and think about the AI space, the number of users is going up, the complexity of the applications and workloads is going up, and the number of applications we're using AI is going up, all three at the same time. I actually think the demand for compute and the gap between supply and demand of where we are today has actually grown over the last 12 months. So without these external factors disrupting things which are impossible for people to predict, I do think this ecosystem is going to continue to grind higher.